Previously in Solo Leveling Season 2, the story reached a turning point as Jinwoo brought an end to the terrifying ant colony on Jeju Island, claiming victory and gaining a powerful new ally in the form of the Ant King, Beru, now a loyal shadow soldier. Following the aftermath, at the funeral of fallen hunters, Jinwoo revealed his plan to form his own guild. With newfound resolve, he soon stepped into uncharted territory, facing even greater monsters and beginning to uncover the true masterminds lurking behind the rising chaos. After clearing the first wave of magical beasts in the Red Gate, Jinwoo pressed forward with his summoned soldiers, advancing toward the next target. Then, the dungeon boss emerged. Flanked by his elite guards, he scanned the battlefield, searching for the one responsible for the massacre of his forces. His gaze locked onto Jinwoo, an overwhelming presence that sent a ripple of unease through him. But before he could even issue a command, a chilling realization set in. The battlefield was silent. His entire army, all of them, had already been wiped out. Jinwoo found the situation amusing. He commanded his shadow soldiers to reveal themselves, then, with a cold gaze, ordered them to eliminate the enemies standing before him. Jinwoo, along with his shadow army, marched forward, exuding an overwhelming aura that was impossible to ignore. Sensing the imminent threat, the magic beasts charged with ferocity, but they were no match. The battlefield descended into chaos as Jinwoo's forces brutally tore through their enemies, dismantling them piece by piece. The boss, now paralyzed with fear, could do nothing but watch as his forces were annihilated. His agonized screams echoed through the dungeon as he called out for his fallen subordinates, but none remained. In a final desperate attempt, the boss lunged forward, but Beru, moving at lightning speed, struck first. His claws pierced through the boss's body. Igris followed up, severing an arm in one swift motion. Tusk delivered the finishing blow, slamming the boss into the ground with overwhelming force. The entire battlefield trembled from the impact. As the dust settled, Jinwoo stepped forward. The boss lay in a pool of his own blood, barely clinging to life. Jinwoo demanded answers, but the creature remained silent. The system was likely interfering again, preventing it from revealing any crucial information. With a sigh, Jinwoo dismissed the thought. For now, he had something else to focus on. He opened his inventory and, with a focused expression, took out a key. It was the cursed random box key, a rare item he had obtained after defeating Baran in the Demon Castle. At the time, the key had offered no information, leaving Jinwoo puzzled about its purpose. But now, after reaching level 100 following his achievements in the Jeju Island raid, the required conditions had been met. The system had finally revealed the details behind the mysterious key. It was the key to the Kartanon Temple's gate. A message popped up, stating that the location of the designated gate would be revealed once the allotted time had passed. The name struck a chord in Jinwoo's mind, Kartanon Temple. A rush of memories flooded in. The double dungeon, the ancient temple at its end, the eerie stone statues, and the stone slate held by one of them. The pieces were finally falling into place. Jinwoo realized that the system was calling him back to where it all began. The very place that had set him on the path of a reawakened hunter was summoning him once more. But this time, it felt different. If everything had been orchestrated from the start, if the system had been waiting for his return, then Jinwoo knew he had to answer the call. The challenge had been issued once again, and this time, he was ready. With steely resolve, Jinwoo declared in his mind for the statue of God to wait for him, because he was coming. As Jinwoo stepped out of the Red Gate after clearing it, daylight had already broken. He began walking toward his car, ready to head to his guild office, when a man suddenly approached him, introducing himself as Adam White, a senior official from the Federal Bureau of Hunters. The man's presence hinted at something important. Curious, Jinwoo asked why he had come all the way from the United States to meet him. Adam responded with something that immediately piqued his interest. He had information that no other country or institution could provide. Adam explained that the Bureau made it their mission to share knowledge with special individuals like Jinwoo, and after his performance on Jeju Island, their interest in him had skyrocketed. But Jinwoo, skeptical, was ready to walk away, until Adam said one word: upgrader. That stopped him in his tracks. Adam offered to explain further, and the two drove off to meet the Bureau's deputy director. Upon arriving, Jinwoo was greeted by Michael Connor, the deputy director himself, who wasted no time getting to the point. He extended an offer, an invitation to join the American Hunters. Jinwoo, uninterested in their proposal, cut straight to the real reason he was there: the upgrader. Soon, a middle-aged woman named Norma Selner entered the room. Connor introduced her as the upgrader, the only person in the world capable of enhancing an awakened being's abilities. Miss Selner explained her powers, though Jinwoo remained skeptical. When he questioned the effectiveness of her ability, she claimed that an individual could experience a 20 to 30% increase in strength after completing all 3 stages. Connor emphasized that the Bureau was willing to grant Jinwoo this incredible gift, hoping he would accept. To prove her abilities, Miss Selner offered to perform the first stage right there. She gently took Jinwoo's wrist, instructing him to look into her eyes. Connor, watching closely, was certain that once Jinwoo experienced the upgrade firsthand, he would be eager to continue and sign the agreement. But what happened next left everyone in shock. As Miss Selner gazed into Jinwoo's eyes, she suddenly found herself consumed by an overwhelming darkness. She searched frantically, but saw nothing until a shadow emerged. It moved closer, revealing its terrifying presence as it opened its eyes and stared directly at her. Overwhelmed by fear, she screamed and fell off her chair, completely shaken by what she had seen. The 2 agents guarding Miss Selner instantly drew their guns, aiming at Jinwoo in a panic. Connor, alarmed by their reaction, quickly intervened, shouting for them to lower their weapons. He reminded them of who Jinwoo was, warning that if they had acted this way towards someone like Thomas Andre or Liu Zhigang, they wouldn't have lived to regret it. Realizing their mistake, the agents swiftly holstered their guns and rushed to assist the trembling Miss Selner. Connor turned back and bowed deeply to Jinwoo, apologizing profusely for his agent's actions. Still trying to process what had just happened, Jinwoo reassured him that it was okay. Connor rushed to Miss Selner's side, trying to understand what had happened. She could barely speak, her breathing unsteady. Seeing her distress, he quickly decided it would be best to reschedule their meeting with Jinwoo. Without hesitation, Adam escorted Jinwoo out of the room. Still struggling to catch her breath, Miss Selner finally managed to speak. To her, Jinwoo was no ordinary hunter. He was a king, a powerful king beyond anything she had ever encountered. Connor, trying to grasp the magnitude of her words, asked if this meant Jinwoo was as strong as a national-level hunter, but Miss Selner admitted that this wasn't something she could measure. What she had experienced went far beyond rankings or classifications. Still trembling, she described the sensation that had shaken her to her core. When she looked at Jinwoo, it wasn't just him she saw, but a presence within him, a force so deep and overwhelming that it had looked into her as she tried to peer into him. As fear gripped her, she shared one last chilling realization with Connor. There was no limit to Jinwoo's power. As Jinwoo left the room, the atmosphere remained tense. The Bureau had sought to recruit him, believing they could offer him something valuable. Instead, they had just uncovered something far beyond their understanding. The story then shifted to an earlier event in the timeline. The scene cut to America, where a hunter was trapped in a high-level dungeon. Fear gripped his face as a chilling presence emerged before him, Silid, the Frost Monarch who was on the hunt for the rulers within the country. A moment later, a gate opened behind him, revealing Yogumund, the Transfiguration Monarch. He hurried toward Silid, bringing urgent news about a small island to the east. Silid frowned, questioning why Yogumund was bringing up a place he had already claimed, as the island in the east was home to the Shadow Monarch. Yogumund explained that the rulers were attempting to free Legia, south of that location, and he needed to head there immediately. He urged the Frost Monarch to take his place in the east. But Silid pressed again. What about the Shadow Monarch? Yogumund reassured him that as long as the architect fulfilled the contract and everything would go according to plan. However, he also shared an intriguing detail that made Silid grin with excitement. The greatest fragment of light had been located in the east. Just then, the Frost Monarch sensed a powerful presence. A ruler had arrived. It was Song Il-hwan, Jinwoo's father. He had deliberately left traces of his power, luring the monarchs to America. His glare was filled with fury as he demanded to know if they were referring to Korea as the small island to the east. As they prepared to leave, the Frost Monarch confirmed it, taunting Il-hwan to chase them if he dared. Not one to back down, Il-hwan launched a swift attack, but Silid countered effortlessly, erecting a massive ice wall that exploded upon impact, shaking the entire area. Back in the present, Yu Jinho sat in the office, fully committed to his new mission, silencing anyone who dared to badmouth Jinwoo. After the Jeju Island raid and the controversy surrounding Jinwoo's involvement, he was determined to protect both his partner and their guild's reputation. Wasting no time, he meticulously went through each offending comment, reporting them one by one with unwavering focus. Just then, Jinwoo appeared silently beside him. The sudden presence startled Jinho, snapping him out of his concentration. Jinwoo casually asked if there was any trouble, but Jinho assured him everything was fine. That's when he noticed something unusual. Jinwoo was still in his hunter gear. Jinwoo explained that he had just returned from a gate, bringing back high-level magic cores to fund their guild. Hearing this, Jinho was both relieved and impressed. With such valuable resources, they wouldn't have to worry about salaries for future employees. Jinwoo, however, looked confused when Jinho mentioned employees. Jinho reminded him that they still needed one more member to officially establish the guild. But before they could dwell on it, another pressing issue came up: the guild's name. Jinwoo initially dismissed it as unimportant, but Jinho emphasized that a name would define their identity. As they debated potential names, a knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Jinho hesitated, curious about who could be visiting. As he creaked the door open, he froze in shock. Standing before him was Hunter Cha Hae-in. Jinwoo was just as surprised. Someone of her stature showing up at his office was completely unexpected. He asked what brought her there, and Hae-in, without hesitation, stated her reason. She wanted to join his guild. Jinwoo, puzzled by her request, sought clarification. It had only been 2 years since her awakening, which meant she was still under contract with the Hunters Guild. He assumed she wouldn't be able to leave so easily, but to his surprise, Hae-in was willing to pay the penalty to break her contract. What shocked him even more was that she expected nothing in return, not even a signing bonus or a salary. Jinwoo couldn't understand why she would abandon one of Korea's most powerful guilds for his newly formed, unproven one. Pressing further, he asked why she was making such a drastic decision. Hae-in hesitated. She lowered her gaze, struggling to put her feelings into words. She couldn't possibly admit the truth. After what happened in Jeju and how he saved her from the jaws of death, she wanted to be near him. But she couldn't say that. Instead, she composed herself and gave a made-up excuse. She simply wanted a simpler life. Jinwoo listened, understanding more than he let on. As an S-rank hunter himself, he knew the burden that came with it. But he wasn't about to let her join just like that. To test her resolve, Jinwoo introduced a guild entrance test. Hae-in was caught off guard, as there was no mention of a test in the recruitment notice. However, Jinwoo smoothly deflected, implying it must have been an oversight on Jinho's part. For the test, Jinwoo announced that she would have to face one of his summons, his strongest one. Yet, despite the unexpected challenge, Hae-in didn't even flinch. There was no fear, no hesitation. She was ready to take it on. Without wasting any time, Jinwoo suggested heading to the Hunter Association's gymnasium to conduct the test. As they prepared to leave, Jinwoo realized that the gymnasium was quite far from their office. He wanted to test if his shadow exchange skill could transport both of them together. He reassured Hae-in that there was no need for a long walk. They could take a shortcut, but she needed to stay close. As Jinwoo stepped toward her, Hae-in felt a lump in her throat. He was closer than she expected. Before she could process it, Jinwoo activated Shadow Exchange. In an instant, their forms sank into the shadows, vanishing from the room without a sound. As they arrived at the gymnasium, the lights flickered on automatically, reacting to their mana. The vast space was brightly illuminated, and Hae-in couldn't hide her amazement at what she had just experienced. She took a moment to take in her surroundings before her gaze finally settled on Jinwoo, who was already prepared to begin the test. Just as they were about to start, Hae-in realized she had left her weapon behind. Jinwoo pointed out that the gymnasium had reserve weapons, though they were mostly for training and not of the highest quality. Without hesitation, she examined the selection and chose a sword similar in weight and length to her usual one. Once she confirmed her choice, Jinwoo summoned Igris, the best swordsman among his shadow soldiers. While Beru was undoubtedly his strongest summon, Jinwoo knew unleashing him against Hae-in might be too much, potentially even traumatizing, so he settled on Igris for this test. Jinwoo explained the conditions. Victory would be achieved by destroying the summon, while defeat would occur if Hae-in surrendered. To make the fight fair, he retrieved the Demon Monarch's sword from his inventory and handed it to Igris. Without wasting any time, Jinwoo gave the signal, and the match began. Igris struck first, swinging the Demon Monarch's sword with deadly precision. A bolt of lightning shot toward Hae-in, crackling with immense power. She reacted instantly, dodging with cat-like agility as the blast struck the wall behind her, leaving a deep, charred mark. Jinwoo watched closely, impressed. A lesser hunter would have been fatally wounded if they had been even slightly grazed by that attack. Without losing momentum, Hae-in gripped her sword and charged forward. Her focus was unwavering, and Igris met her head-on. Their blades clashed, sending sparks flying, each strike resonating through the gymnasium. Jinwoo had expected a good fight, but as he observed the battle, he realized he had underestimated Hae-in. Despite wielding the Demon Monarch's sword, Igris was struggling. Hae-in's attacks were relentless, her technique refined and precise. With one final blow, she sent Igris crashing into the wall. The impact reverberated through the space, and Jinwoo knew the outcome was decided. Before Igris could rise again, he called off the match. But Hae-in wasn't satisfied. She stepped forward, her breathing steady, and questioned whether Igris was truly the strongest summon Jinwoo had. Her gaze was unwavering as she insisted on facing his strongest one now. Jinwoo hesitated, knowing exactly who she meant. He was concerned she might get hurt, but Hae-in's determination was absolute. She wasn't backing down. She wanted this fight. After a brief pause, Jinwoo finally agreed and, without saying another word, summoned Beru. The moment the shadow ant materialized, the atmosphere in the gymnasium shifted, but despite the crushing weight of his aura, Hien stood firm. Beru, ever loyal to Jinwoo, awaited confirmation of his orders. Jinwoo commanded him to defeat Hien, but made one thing clear: she must not be harmed. With his mission set, Beru unleashed a thunderous battle cry that shook the gymnasium. His blade-like claws extended menacingly from his fingers, ready to strike. Just as the tension peaked, Jinwoo's stern voice cut through the silence, reminding Beru of his command. Hearing his liege's instruction, Beru immediately retracted his claws. In that instant, Hien saw an opening and moved to seize the moment, but before she could react, Beru vanished from her sight. An icy shiver ran down her spine. She had seen this move before, on Jeju Island. She steeled herself, refusing to fall for the same trick twice. Beru reappeared behind her, his presence looming over her, but this time, she was ready. Her blade lashed out in a flurry of precise strikes. Dozens of slashes cut through the air, yet not a single one landed. Beru dodged effortlessly, his form unmoving, his gaze impassive. The overwhelming difference in their power became painfully clear. No matter how fast or how precise her attacks were, they simply couldn't reach him. Confusion and frustration began to set in for Hien. She couldn't understand. How could he be so powerful? And more importantly, what kind of strength did Jinwoo possess to command a monster like this with such ease? As doubt settled in, Beru suddenly closed the distance between them. A suffocating stench of death washed over her, paralyzing her limbs. For a fleeting moment, she felt as if it was over. But instead of attacking, Beru released a terrifying roar. The force of his magic power sent Hien skidding backward, momentarily stunned. Jinwoo watched the one-sided fight unfold with a grimace. He found no pleasure in the spectacle and asked if Hien was satisfied, hoping she would yield. But despite everything, her resolve hadn't wavered. She still wanted to fight. Jinwoo observed closely, trying to understand her intentions. By now, she knew she couldn't win. She had seen the sheer gap in their strength, yet she still refused to back down. He could sense Beru's growing irritation. Unlike his other summons, Beru was still a predator at heart. Even now, Jinwoo could feel him suppressing his overwhelming instinct to kill. Suddenly, Beru's patience snapped. His instincts flared, and he could no longer tolerate prey standing up to its predator. With a flick of his wrist, his claws extended once more as he lunged at Hien with lethal intent. But she dodged, barely. Realizing she had to take a risk, Hien activated her most powerful technique, sword dance. Moving with increasing speed, her blade carved elegant arcs in the air, each strike flowing seamlessly into the next. The sound of metal clashing filled the room as Beru blocked every attack with his claws. Despite his calm demeanor, his displeasure was evident. Growing tired of the game, Beru decided to end it. As Hien lunged for another strike, he caught her sword with his bare hand. With a sickening crunch, he shattered it. Half the blade fell to the floor. But Hien didn't hesitate. She channeled all her remaining magic power into the broken weapon, its jagged edge glowing with an intense light. She was about to unleash a skill she had never used before, Blade of Light. Seeing her chance, Hien thrust her glowing weapon toward Beru, who had briefly lowered his guard after breaking her sword. Watching from the sidelines, Jinwoo's eyes widened. Something was wrong. In that brief moment, Beru's mind reset. Jinwoo's command to avoid harming Hien was overwritten, and an old, deeply ingrained instinct from his previous life resurfaced: annihilate all enemies. To Beru, Hien was no longer an opponent. She was prey. Claws outstretched, Beru launched himself at Hien with terrifying speed, intent on ending her. She froze, her instinct screaming at her, but it was too late to react. Just as his claws were about to reach her, Jinwoo intervened. In a blur, he caught Beru's attack with his bare hands. Beru trembled as his gaze met Jinwoo's. Realizing his mistake, he leaped back, dropping to the ground, begging for forgiveness. Jinwoo sighed, understanding what had happened. Beru's protective instincts had momentarily overridden his command. For a moment, he glared at the kneeling shadow before shifting his gaze toward Hien. She had fallen to one knee, her breathing ragged. He still didn't understand. Why was she pushing herself so hard? Someone of her caliber didn't need to risk her life over a guild entrance exam. It wasn't worth it. Jinwoo asked her why she was pushing herself so hard, hoping for an answer that would make sense. But Hien remained silent, avoiding his gaze. Her silence only deepened his confusion. Still confused, Jinwoo asked Hien if she was interested in him. Hien's head snapped up, her expression betraying her shock. She looked completely caught off guard, as if the question had pulled her out of a daze. Jinwoo, sensing her surprise, dismissed the thought with a shrug. But after a long pause, Hien quietly admitted the truth. Jinwoo was right. She did have feelings for him. At the Federal Bureau of Hunters in the United States, Director David Brennan wasn't pleased with the recent news. His men had failed to recruit Sung Jinwoo, a hunter the Bureau had been determined to bring into their ranks ever since witnessing his overwhelming strength during the Jeju Island raid. Assistant Director Connor, accompanied by Norma Selner standing beside him, apologized for their failure in completing the assignment. Brennan, eager to get to the bottom of the situation, wasted no time in demanding an explanation. He wasn't interested in apologies, he needed to know what had gone wrong. Connor detailed everything that had happened in Korea, describing their failed efforts to bring Jinwoo under the Bureau's authority. He explained to the director that, based on Miss Selner's observations, Jinwoo was supposed to be one of the monarchs. This revelation about Jinwoo took Brennan by surprise. If true, it meant Jinwoo's power was beyond what they had anticipated. Brennan immediately sought clarification, questioning whether this put him on the level of a national-level hunter. Miss Selner took a deep breath before explaining. All reawakened hunters drew their strength from a realm known as the other side. Their abilities were not their own, but channeled from this unseen force. She had always been able to perceive these connections, feeling the energy each hunter borrowed. Some hunters glowed brighter than the rest, appearing to her as streaks of blinding light. She had always referred to them as monarchs. But Jinwoo's case was different. A chill ran through her as she recalled the experience. When she looked into Jinwoo's eyes, she hadn't seen a connection to another source of power. Instead, she had seen darkness, a vast, overwhelming force, something endless and all-consuming. Unlike other hunters, Jinwoo did not borrow his strength from anywhere. He was the source of his own power. No external forces granted him abilities, no limitations restricted his growth. He was the darkness itself. The weight of her words settled over the room like a suffocating pressure. Director Brennan, now understanding the gravity of the situation, thanked Miss Selner for her time. The implications were far beyond what he had expected. Connor watched as Director Brennan abruptly began walking, clearly having a plan in mind. When he asked where he was headed, Brennan instructed Connor to follow him to basement level 24. Both men walked to the elevator and stepped inside. As the doors closed and the descent began, Director Brennan finally broke the silence. If they couldn't use Miss Selner's abilities to bring Jinwoo into the Bureau, they would need to find another way. He wasn't willing to give up so easily. He then reminded Connor of the first ever S-rank gate that had opened, a moment in history that no one could forget. Connor immediately understood what he was referring to. That catastrophic dungeon break had unleashed destruction on a scale never seen before, wiping out the entire West Coast. In response to the disaster, America had launched an unprecedented operation, offering massive rewards to gather the world's strongest hunters. Out of all those who had participated in the legendary raid, only 5 had survived. These 5 warriors, forged in the flames of battle, had been granted a title that carried the weight of an entire nation, national-level hunters. The monster responsible for the carnage was Kamish, the dragon known as the Undying Flame, a beast so powerful that it had single-handedly slaughtered hundreds of top-ranking hunters. Its name was etched into history as a symbol of absolute terror. As they reached basement level 24, Director Brennan questioned whether Connor could truly believe that nothing had been gained from such a tragedy. Connor hesitated for a moment before realizing what the director was implying. Brennan silently confirmed his suspicion as they stepped into the last room on the level. The reinforced door slid open, revealing a chamber unlike any other in the facility. Brennan stepped forward and carefully opened a safe embedded into the wall, unveiling the heavily secured artifact. It was a runestone, extracted from Kamish's remains. Brennan explained that it had been 8 years since this rune had been recovered from the remains of the most fearsome monster in human history, and yet, in all that time, not a single hunter had been able to activate it. The power of the rune remained untouched, waiting in the shadows as if it had been left behind for someone else, for the one hunter who might finally unlock its secrets. As Brennan stared at Kamish's mortal remains, his mind raced with possibilities, wondering if this powerful artifact could be the key to their dilemma. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Jinwoo stood in front of his bathroom mirror, lost in thought. Heian's words from earlier lingered in his mind. Jinwoo wondered if he had really changed that much, considering himself fairly slim with average looks. Curious about how others might see him, he glanced into the living room, where Jinna was lying on the couch. Grinning to himself, he decided to ask for her opinion. But Jinna, unimpressed, shot him down instantly. She questioned where he had gotten such baseless confidence and playfully teased him, insisting that, in her eyes, he still looked like a bum. Jinwoo smirked before pinching her cheek, which quickly escalated into their usual playful banter. Their conversation soon shifted when Jinwoo mentioned his plans to form a new guild. Jinna, now genuinely intrigued, asked if he had settled on a name. he suggested solo play guild. Jinna, however, immediately rejected it. She pointed out the obvious contradiction. Jinwoo wasn't a true solo player. His strength came from his ability to summon an army of shadow soldiers, so the name didn't make any sense. After thinking for a moment, Jinna offered an alternative, Ajin Guild. She explained the meaning behind it, where A meant I and Jin meant to go forward. Jinwoo found it surprisingly clever, but what amused him the most was when Jinna revealed the real reason behind her choice. It was simply her name spelled backward. After mulling it over, Jinwoo admitted it wasn't a bad name for his new guild. That night, Hai-In lay on her bed, feeling overwhelmed with embarrassment. The memory of her earlier conversation with Jinwoo kept replaying in her mind. She had practically confessed her feelings. The realization made her cringe. She buried her face deeper into the blanket, wondering if Jinwoo now thought of her as a strange woman. Every time she tried to brush it off, the moment resurfaced, making her mind go completely blank. She told herself it was natural to be interested in him. After all, he had saved her life. But deep down, she knew her feelings were far more complicated. For a brief moment, her thoughts drifted to Min Byung-gyu, the healer whose abilities had actually saved her. But just as she recalled him, a faint voice rang in her head. The voice was familiar, yet distant. She closed her eyes, desperately trying to grasp the fleeting memory. Something about it felt urgent, as if it had been buried in her subconscious, waiting for the right moment to surface. The voice echoed again. It spoke about Jinwoo. Slowly, the memory began to take shape. The fog in her mind lifted, revealing Min Byung-gyu's shadow. But something was different. His usual calm demeanor was tinged with an unusual worry. His eyes, filled with concern, were locked onto her as he spoke. He had told her to warn Jinwoo, to tell him to be careful of the power he possessed. A chill ran down Hae-In's spine. Her eyes snapped open as she sat up abruptly. At the Knights Guild, Yoontae arrived with urgent news for Guildmaster Park Jong-soo. A new gate had appeared the previous day, and securing a raid permit was proving difficult due to its high rank. While it wasn't an S-rank gate, it was dangerously close, enough to cause concern. The problem was clear. The Knights Guild simply didn't have the manpower to form a proper assault squad for such a high-level raid, but as one of the 5 major guilds in the country, failing to take it on would damage their reputation. Yoontae pointed out that if they passed on this gate, the Fame Guild would likely seize the opportunity. The idea of handing over a gate that had appeared so close to their own territory made Jong-soo fume with anger. While their A-rank hunters were strong, comparable to those in other major guilds, their biggest weakness remained unchanged. They had no S-rank hunters. That single fact alone prevented them from taking on the raid. As Jong-soo and Yoontae discussed their limited options, Jung Yerim, an A-rank healer, joined the conversation. She suggested forming an alliance with another guild, a logical choice under normal circumstances, but Jong-soo was skeptical. However, Yerim had a different idea. Instead of a guild alliance, she proposed bringing in a single hunter. Jong-soo initially dismissed the idea, questioning how a single hunter could make a difference in such a high-level raid, but before he could brush it off completely, something clicked. He suddenly realized who Jung Yerim was referring to. He knew that if they could bring Hunter Sung Jinwoo into the raid, it wouldn't just increase their chances of safely clearing the gate, but also enhance their public image. With no time to waste, Jong-soo immediately decided to meet Jinwoo in person to discuss this crucial matter. With the Knights Guild planning ahead for their crucial meeting, Jinwoo arrived at his office the next day, having made a decision about his new guild's name. He proposed Ajin Guild. Jinho was thrilled with the suggestion, feeling relieved that it wasn't something ridiculous like Solo Play Guild. With the name settled, Jinwoo and Jinho knew they only needed one last founding member to complete the team. Jinho was taken by surprise when Jinwoo dismissed Hunter Cha Hai-In as the potential candidate. Even though she seemed perfect for their guild, Jinwoo explained that she wasn't the right fit. He was looking for someone with a hunter's license who had no interest in guild activities. As they were discussing, a knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Jinwoo briefly wondered if it might be Hai-In again, but when he opened the door, he was met with 3 unfamiliar faces, Park Jong-soo, Yoontae, and Jung Yerim from the Knights Guild. Jong-soo introduced himself and immediately got to the point, showing Jinwoo a video of a massive gate that had appeared in Busan. While it hadn't been officially classified as S-rank, its sheer size made it the largest gate ever recorded in the city. The situation was urgent. Jong-soo explained that the Knights Guild was struggling to obtain a raid permit because they had no S-rank hunters. That was the real reason for their visit. They had traveled all this way to ask Jinwoo to join their assault team. If he agreed, it would fulfill the requirements needed to secure the permit they desperately wanted. To make the offer more appealing, Jung-soo offered Jinwoo 20% of the profits, a generous share compared to the usual 10% most S-rank hunters received. Jinwoo, however, countered with a 50-50 split. He made it clear that he would only join them if they treated him as a guild rather than just an individual hunter. Jung-soo, realizing that Jinwoo was far from a pushover, agreed to the terms, but with one condition. Jinwoo would have to defeat the dungeon boss. Without hesitation, Jinwoo accepted. Jung-soo informed him that the raid needed to happen by the next day at the latest. Jinwoo had no objections and assured them he wouldn't be late. Just as the meeting was wrapping up, Jinwoo's phone vibrated. Stepping outside to take the call, he was greeted by a familiar voice, his mother. She had just bought a cell phone and called simply because she wanted to hear his voice. Jinwoo, happy to hear from her, suggested they have dinner together that night. As it had been a while since they had spent time together, she agreed, and Jinwoo looked forward to the evening. The next day, at Gwangali Beach in Busan, the elite hunters of the Knights Guild had gathered at the designated meeting point. Guildmaster Park Jong-soo stood among them, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness as he anxiously awaited Jinwoo's arrival. The scheduled start time was fast approaching. Only 5 minutes remained before the raid was set to begin. At that exact moment, Jinwoo stepped out of his apartment building. He glanced up at the sky, sensing that it was time. Without wasting a second, he activated Shadow Exchange and disappeared. Back at Gwangali Beach, a large crowd had formed, their eyes locked on the enormous gate, despite the gloomy clouds overhead. The sheer size of it was intimidating, even up close. Jinwoo observed the scene carefully, noting the various raid teams assembled, and was quietly impressed by the number of A-rank hunters present. As he walked forward, he quickly found himself surrounded by the other hunters. They were eager to see him in action, especially after his legendary performance during the Jeju Island raid. The air buzzed with excitement and curiosity, but Jinwoo found the sudden attention somewhat uncomfortable. Noticing his unease, Yong Yerim stepped in to deflect some of the attention. Her intervention gave Jinwoo a much-needed moment of respite from the barrage of questions. Meanwhile, Jung-soo, thrilled to see Jinwoo arrive, greeted him with enthusiasm. Jung-soo quickly addressed the group, officially announcing that as guildmaster, he would be leading the raid. The declaration was met with disappointment from several hunters, many of whom had hoped that Jinwoo would take command instead. Despite their reactions, Jung-soo remained firm, explaining that Jinwoo's role was to protect the backline and ensure the team's safety. With everything in place, Jung-soo signaled the start of the raid. The team moved forward, stepping toward the unknown dangers lurking beyond the gate, ready to face whatever awaited them inside. While things had settled at Gwangali Beach with Jinwoo's arrival, a storm was silently brewing elsewhere, inside Jinna's high school. 3 male students, grumbling about being sent on an errand, wandered through the halls, following their art teacher's instructions. Their destination was the second art classroom, a room that had long been repurposed into a storage space. As they unlocked the door, a thick cloud of dust greeted them, filling the air with the stale scent of neglect. Casually discussing how many statues they needed to carry back, one of them suddenly froze. His eyes locked onto something unusual in the far corner of the room. The others followed his gaze. There, embedded in the wall, was a large, blue gate. Curiosity got the better of them. One of the students stepped forward, reaching out to inspect the gate, completely convinced that nothing would happen. At that moment, a deep crack split through the gate's surface. Before he could react, a hand shot out. It clamped down on the boy's head with an iron grip. He struggled desperately, but the hand's strength was absolute. Soon, a sickening crack echoed through the room. Blood splattered across the walls as his skull was crushed instantly. The remaining 2 students, paralyzed in horror, barely had time to scream before the gate shattered like glass. From the fractured portal, beasts began pouring into the world. The first creatures to emerge were 2 massive orcs. Their keen senses immediately detected prey nearby. The entire building was teeming with prey. One of them, eager for the thrill of the hunt, decided the time had come. He ordered his companion to summon their brothers. Once their forces were assembled, they would wipe out every human in the building before fortifying their position. As the leader orc walked through the corridor, he spotted 2 students in the distance and, without hesitation, charged at them with his axe raised high. The students, caught in the monster's bloodthirsty gaze, stood paralyzed in terror. In the blink of an eye, a normal school day had turned into a massacre. As the nightmare unfolded, one student managed to fumble for their phone. With shaking hands, they dialed the Hunters Association Emergency Center. An employee answered quickly. On the other end was a teenage girl, her voice trembling with fear. The receptionist tried to remain calm and professional, asking how she could assist. The girl, barely able to get her words out, whispered that she was at her school, hiding in a bathroom while terrifying beasts roamed outside. The receptionist's breath caught for a moment, as she realized the gravity of the situation. As the girl struggled to form a sentence, overwhelmed by sheer terror, the receptionist urged her to stay calm and assured that hunters were already on their way. She gently asked the girl to describe the creatures. Through quiet sobs, the girl explained. They had human-like bodies, ugly faces, and green skin. A shiver ran down the receptionist's spine. She knew what they were dealing with, an orc outbreak. But before she could warn the girl, it was too late. A deep, guttural growl rumbled through the speaker. Then came a single, blood-curdling scream, and the line went dead. The school had turned into a slaughterhouse. While some students had managed to flee, many weren't as lucky. Bloodied corpses littered the hallways, and those still alive were either running for their lives or cowering and hiding. Orcs, with blood dripping from their axes, stood over the lifeless bodies of their victims. Though some prey had managed to escape, their cruel, beastly eyes gleamed with satisfaction. There were still plenty more students trapped inside. On the top floor, a group of students huddled together, their bodies pressed against the walls as they listened to the horrors unfolding below. They had barricaded the classroom door with desks and chairs, but it was a feeble defense at best. The boys in the room clutched whatever they could find, chairs, mops, anything that could be used as a weapon, but their hands trembled and their eyes betrayed the truth. They knew none of it would make a difference. Suddenly, the door exploded from its frame as the leader orc burst into the classroom. Panic surged through the students as one boy, desperate to escape, sprinted toward the back door, only to be struck down instantly by an orc waiting in the shadows. With both exits blocked, the remaining students were trapped like cornered prey. Pressed against the wall, they could only watch in horror as the orcs closed in. Amid the chaos, Jinna huddled with her classmates in a corner, her heart pounding. Fear consumed her, but in that moment of terror, she clung to a single hope, her brother Jinwoo. She called out to him in her mind, believing with all her heart that he would come for her. An orc scanned the group of terrified students and sensed something unusual, a surge of magic energy. It was coming from Jinna. Her presence stood out, and the orc's bloodthirsty gaze locked onto her as he became fixated on killing her. As the orc took a step toward her, Jinna's classmate stepped in the way. Summoning every ounce of courage she had, she tried to block the orc's path, but it was futile. His eyes remained locked on Jinna as he raised his massive axe, ready to strike. Jinna watched in horror as the weapon rose above her head. She couldn't move. Her body was frozen in fear. Desperately, she squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable. Just as the orc prepared to strike, something completely unexpected happened. All of a sudden, a high orc shadow soldier clad in black armor emerged, gripping the orc's wrist with an iron grip. The orc barely had time to react before the shadow soldier slammed its fist down on its head with overwhelming force. The impact was so brutal that the orc shot through the roof like a rocket. Soon, more high orc shadow soldiers materialized, their imposing figures rising from the darkness. Their eyes locked onto any remaining threats as they moved in unison, forming an impenetrable wall around Jinna. The battle had shifted. She was no longer in danger. Jinwoo's shadow soldiers had turned up at the school just in time, securing the area, while their master, on the other hand, had entered the dungeon alongside the Knights Guild raid party. Upon entering, they were met with a twin-headed ogre. The creature roared and swung its massive battle axe with all its might, aiming to crush anything in its path. Jongsu, the tank of the group, charged forward, raising his shield just in time to block the powerful blow. The sheer force of the attack sent shockwaves through the ground, but he held firm. As Jongsu held the line, he called out to Yuntai, who dashed in with lightning speed. With precision and agility, he leapt onto the ogre and slashed at both of its eyes. The beast roared in agony, thrashing wildly as Yuntai signaled the others to strike and inflict as much damage as possible. Seizing the opportunity, the Knights Guild hunters launched a coordinated counterattack. Their frontline fighters moved in sync, slashing deep into the ogre's thick hide, while the mages positioned behind them rained down scorching spells. The monstrous creature, now covered in wounds and burns, staggered backward before collapsing with a heavy thud. Jongsu called for a brief regroup, acknowledging the difficulty of the raid. Encountering a twin-headed ogre at the entrance of a dungeon was rare, an ominous sign. Jinwoo, surveying the scene, identified it as a gravekeeper. Jongsu explained that such creatures often signified an army of undead lurking deeper within. Trying to keep the tension in check, Yuntai joked about not jinxing their situation, but before anyone could respond, they noticed something strange. The undead creatures within the dungeon weren't charging at them as expected. Instead, they were retreating, backing away as if something far more terrifying was chasing them. Jinwoo's instincts flared. A sudden jolt of adrenaline shot through him as his heart pounded. He picked up urgent signals from the High Orc warriors, he had stationed to protect Jinnah. Something was wrong. Without hesitation, he turned to Jongsu, informing him that he had an urgent matter to attend to. Jongsu, startled by the sudden announcement, protested, concerned about the dangers they might face without his presence. But Jinwoo remained unfazed. With a cold, steady gaze, he assured them that he would summon someone just as reliable to take his place. Then, without delay, he called forth the most powerful soldier in his shadow army, Beru. He instructed him to protect the humans while dealing with any other creatures however he pleased. The sheer presence of Beru, radiating overwhelming mana, sent a wave of fear through the hunters. They instinctively backed away, uneasy at the thought of finishing the raid alongside such a monstrous being. Jinwoo calmly informed them that his summoned soldiers, including Beru, would assist them. He assured Jongsu that 20 of his shadows were more than enough to clear the dungeon. Yerim, still in shock, questioned